Welcome back. Well, let's examine this community policing component. Yes, huge amounts of funds have just been approved after the ad hoc committee submitted their report. And then that is what they came up with as a result of that. But how is this? What do we expect moving forward, having seen these approvals? We've got Abe Agiole joining us this morning. He's a former commissioner of police in Kaduna State. He's also a former commandant of police mobile training school. He joins us via Skype from the States. We're also going to have Alfred Onogbo, security consultant, who will also weigh in as well. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. Let me start with you, Mr. Agiole. You've been at the saddle as a CP and several other experiences before becoming the CP and even afterwards. About this community policing, we know different IGPs approach it in different ways that they think will work. But having seen, some excerpts of the report, and then first, the approval of these funds, what does it do? What do we expect? Is this going to, in fact, what's your impression first when you heard about 13 billion naira for community policing? Well, we'll sort that and get back to him while he can. And then let's get Mr. Onogbo at the moment. Mr. Onogbo, can you hear me now? So could you give us your impression? Community policing, what's your impression of this approach now that the government has taken? A huge amount, 13 billion for it.
Thank you very much for having me on. And I want to thank all our viewers and those who are committed to following Channels television. First of all, I'm beginning to think that sometimes political statements precede structural balance. It's good to know that 13 billion has been, let me use the word, earmarked or probably approved for community policing. Now, it's a good news if we have the infrastructures and the necessary institutions that can drive the objectives. But if we do not have the necessary infrastructure to implement the community policing program, then I have a problem with that. And I'd like to say that, well, it's commendable, but the amount going for just community policing without any structures, without any visible establishments, without any form of legislation to drive it, gives me a real concern.
So what is it that you want to see when you highlight all of those? How would you have loved it to be approached?
I think while I want to patronize the government for waking up to the cries of Nigerians about the need to have an efficient policing of our communities and our entire society, I would like to see stakeholders in this industry, stakeholders in the security establishments, sit down to put together what is feasible. I am aware that some state governments have tried to kind of push the community policing program by establishing some organizations within their states to ensure that their people are protected and that their environments are secure. And I would like to emphasize the fact that the government should discuss and kind of sit down with stakeholders. Let's take Nigeria as our collective responsibility. Let's see security of the entire nation as a responsibility that every one of us that are involved could be consulted. I know that could take time, but I'm sure that there are Nigerians who have the experience, who have the exposure, and who can make
Mr.
reasonable
Longo,
input.
when you talk about legislation, that's what I was asking. What kind of legislation is that?
Well, you know that the Nigerian police is established by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Now, anything you are doing outside the Nigerian police force is like duplicating the efforts or duplicating the provisions of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We must accept that the police is the only institution recognized by the Nigerian Constitution. Now, the issue is, what actually is the problem with the Nigerian police? We must find out so that we don't go on setting organizations. We have civil defense, we have other paramilitary agencies and other security agencies that are all involved in the work of policing Nigeria. How come we are not finding solutions to our security problems? So establishing, I'm for community policing, let nobody misunderstand me, but we must understand why we have not been able to drive the existing establishments efficiently.
All right, at that point, let me bring in Mr. Agiole at that point. Let's see if you could answer some of these questions because he's been on the saddle. Mr. Agiole, so go ahead and tell us. Now, there's a certain mindset that may have been pigeonholed community policing when you hear the funds that have been approved for it. But in addition to, perhaps if you want to respond to what he says at the moment, what is your impression about this amount of funds approved for community policing? Does that solve the challenge?
Thank you, Chamberlain. I think I'll be going along with the last speaker in respect of the funding, the amounts made available. The question is, when we make available certain amounts for the police force, are we certain that this whole sum amount will be released to the police force? And then, if such money is made available, what are the plans on ground for the usage of this money? When we are thinking about community policing, we will look at the concept of policing the community itself and distinguishing it from community policing. I think I will want to see a situation whereby we will not be talking more about the money, but what we will do to actualize the success of this program. And I want to tell you, Chamberlain, we must look at it in two dimensions. That is the people themselves and the police itself. Have we been able to build or develop the partnership between the police and the communities? Have we been able to identify the problems of these communities? And then we now begin to think of implementing these policies. When we look at the police itself, do we have the capacity? The men, are they trained to meet up with these current challenges? The question is, we must be able to harness a kind of social discourse between us and the communities. Don't forget, we are coming from a kind of colonial background, militarized background, whereby policing is more of reactionary. So this fund, honestly, it will go a long way if it's actually released to the police force, and then the institution themselves should be able to utilize this fund for the success of this program.
Let me touch on
if this
something
fund available, I will agree that it will help a long way to the success of community policing.
All right, let me touch on the point you made earlier. When you say that will these funds be released and administered properly, stems, I reckon, from a challenge that perhaps you're aware of funds being released and not properly being administered. Is that right? And what are those challenges that might have bedeviled previous scenarios that you want to address if this one is supposed to be utilized judiciously?
I think policies differs a lot, and government's policies are different. And going by the records of this current administration, I think there's need for us to believe that if these funds are released, it will be judiciously used. I believe so.
Does it make any difference? Well, you talked about operationalizing the community policing concept, which, of course, we've been talking about it for years. Now, does it make any difference to you when you hear that the IG, the governors, 3 governors, the finance minister, and the SGF have been co-opted into an implementation committee? Are you comforted that indeed it will begin well and operates maximally this time?
What is the purpose of governance? To bring the people close to government. If bringing everyone on board to meet up with the challenges we are currently facing, I think that will be fine. It will create a kind of check and balances too, because as a matter of fact, we must admit one fact, but that over the years, the police force has been faced with a lot of challenges, and finances are part of these challenges. And if bringing up such amount and incorporating a lot of these people into, I think it will go well. I think so.
Talking about the training, we know that different times there's been different kinds of training organized for the police for community policing. Does that mean that those are not making any impact whatsoever?
Yes. When we are talking of community policing, I keep insisting that we must make a distinction. In community policing, we must first of all gain the trust of the people. Then when we're talking of training of these policemen, what kind of training do we offer them? Because we are going to start performing responsibilities away from the usual traditional policing system. So these police officers charged with these responsibilities must be conditioned to meet up with these challenges. We have about 774 local governments. Over the past years, have we made our presence felt? When we speak of community policing, have the community actually felt our presence? Have we been able to build the trust between us and the communities? Until these are done, we cannot count that we have succeeded in this aspect of community policing.
So let's begin from there. This is the second time you're talking about this trust, quotient between the police and the people. And you also spoke about the difference between community policing and policing the community. Now, how do we bridge this gap? First of all, we can readily understand the difference between policing the community and community policing. How do we bridge that trust gap? Because already there is a public perception about the police. So how do we bridge that gap and then segue into this community policing bit?
When you are policing the community, it's a kind of reactionary force. We all about arrest, investigation, prosecution. And, because I keep insisting that over the years, don't forget, we're coming from a background whereby the function of the police has been very difficult to distinguish between our function and military function. We have functioned so much with the military that the orientation of the average policeman has not changed. So the issue between him and the public is a kind of use of force. And so we need to come back, sit down, evaluate this, build a trust, allow these people to understand that our present day policing is different from what they used to know. We must build an understanding between us and these communities. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult because, like you said, there's a loss of trust already. And this spans from a lot of misconceptions between the police force and the communities. And so by the time we're able to build this trust between us and the communities, honestly, any fund made available can be able to make a meaningful impact. But first of all, it's not about just the funding. The major actors in this field need to be properly trained to understand the concept of community policing. And
in fact, that's where I was leading up to next.
This seeming relationship between us and these communities in which
different IGPs, they approach this differently. So tell us, I mean, from someone watching from a distance, what are those characteristics? What should he see when we talk about community policing?
We must build a relationship between us and people. The police force is supposed to be meant for the people, not the people for the police force. And I think currently a lot of efforts have been done, and I have to appreciate the present IGP. He is doing a lot to be able to bridge this gap. But honestly, there's a lot yet to be done. And if we do not work towards meeting up with these challenges, then it's going to be far-fetched from us achieving the desired result, no matter the fund that is made available.
So where lies the consideration which several people speak about, saying, look, if you want people to police communities, they must be perhaps indigenes of those areas or residents of those areas who understand the nook and cranny about that community. Is that an important factor at all?
If we recall, between I think 1988 and 89, there was this issue of police officers for certain ranks going back to their home states to function. It's a kind of community policing, and honestly, it met some obstacles because we were not prepared. The policemen that went back home were not prepared. They were not conditioned. They did not understand the concept. So going back and working became so difficult, and this program collapsed. And so I think presently we need to understand the concept for which this idea of community policing is derived from. We must understand the philosophy. What is it in there? And then, Chamberlain, the communities differ. Community policing in Taraba State cannot be the same in Imo State. We have different cultural background, different religion, different ideologies, everything. So by the time you begin to generalize this concept, it doesn't work. We must fashion out different communities with their different styles of community policing. I think in so doing, we might be able to get results.
Let me take this back to Mr. Ononugo. This issue isn't new, as you are very well aware. A number of IGPs have talked about community policing and even done one thing or the other about it over the years. This is perhaps the first time that we're really taking a step to effecting it. And I also remember that not too long ago, the IGP was, conversing with some people and said in that conversation that some strategic things have been done, some institutions have been rooted in various states of the country, that the only thing left to effect the community policing was to recruit the police officers. Now, from some of the things that you have heard Mr. Agiali say, do you have any concerns based on some of the issues that he has raised about the poor trust of the people and inadequate understanding of the concept of community policing?
Oh, certainly. There's a moral disconnect between what we say to the Nigerian people and who the people are. And just like he mentioned, there's a lot of issues that are embedded already in the psyche of an average Nigerian. Let me pick them, as much as I can this morning. One, there is this ethnic consciousness that has evolved, and it's become an explosive discourse. Two, the political class have not also demonstrated serious commitment to the Nigerian state when we talk about being patriotic, being accountable, and being selfless in leadership. Now, people are products of their own system. You can't make snow out of the desert. We need to go back to the drawing board. Go to the police as they are today. People are more conscious of where they come from and what they can get out of the system than what they can give to the system. Professionalism has been pushed to a very serious extent to the background. I don't want to re-echo some explosive things like nepotism, favoritism, connections, and the normal Nigerian balance, man no man. Now, these are cankerworms that has been embedded in the culture of the Nigerian society, and the police is not an exception. So we need to give people a sense of ownership. You cannot own what does not belong to you. The structure of policing today in Nigeria has been like it's for the exclusive privileged members of the society. I'll give you an instance. Like in our last discussion, I mentioned that over 70% of the Nigerian police workforce are engaged in non-policing activities. Some of them are doing VIP protection. Some of them are doing military work. Some of them, are more at home in places that are lucrative. So it's not about giving the quality of service the people need. So when you are putting money on a system like this, it will go down the way others have.
Perhaps that's the reason, Mr. Ononugo, just one moment. Perhaps that's the reason that the IGP said that the point we're at now concerning community policing is recruitment of the officers in or for the community policing initiative. Now, what kind of handshake are you expecting between the police and the governors? Some governors, some state governments already have their own protection, institutions, Neighborhood Watch in Lagos, Amotekun Corps in Ondo, and a number of others coming up like that, and several other parts of the north and the south. So a number of them already have those vigilante groups and all of that. What kind of handshake are you expecting, or do you think will help to ensure that this community policing produces the security that will be good for the people?
Well, while I commend the IG, I think also he should ensure that the governors, for instance, have done their homework well. If you are, for instance, let me give you one of the challenges I have. I love the concept of the Amotekun, but if you come to the western part of Nigeria, you will find every community, every tribe, let me borrow that word, even though I don't like it, but you'll find every nationality of Nigerian people in those places. Now, when the people you recruit into Amateku, for instance, are exclusively Southwesterners and not people who are passionate, who are skilled, who are disciplined, and who want to do the job and deliver on the service, then there will be ultimately a problem. People are going to insinuate, people are going to begin to say, oh, Omoteku is for Yoruba, so let the Igbos go and start their own Agune chamber, and then let the Ariwa people start their own. That will be harmful to the Nigerian state. That is one thing the governors must address, so that we are all coming to the drawing board. The governors are coming with a clear community of people that understand that we must separate ethnicity from the need for security, because crime does not have a tribe. crime is a problem to every society. So if we don't have a collective resolve and a good platform to address the problem of crime in our society, we will suffer more, because very soon some overzealous people that found themselves in the corridors of government in politics might begin to turn these institutions or these efforts, these programs, into tools and weapons to hurt their enemies. They use it to witch hunt people. We've seen it in the past, even the ones existing. Today, certain people could commit certain offenses and they'll be allowed to go home, while certain other people could be arrested for things they didn't even do. And they'll be prosecuted, kept in detention until a time that the people who feel they should go home. So there are moral issues, and we must address it. We must also look at the orientation of the Nigerian society. Some Nigerians in some areas of the country are feeling unsafe because of religious bias. Now, if these things are allowed to creep into the security arrangement, we are in a big problem. So the governors have a very serious role to play. And I'm also thinking that even the National Orientation Agency should be empowered and provided with resources to work at giving Nigerians a sound reorientation. Perception matters in everything. If I perceive that there is insecurity around someone that doesn't speak my language, if he joins the police or community policing program, I will never feel comfortable. I will look forward to the day he will use that position to hurt me. If you go to Kano, for instance, we have the Hizbah. They are operating, but you find out that they are operating on religious lines. They are not standing on the Constitution of the Federal Republic. They are exclusively addressing security from the perspective of the Sharia law.
Okay, Mr. Nonibo, just a moment. All right, sorry about that. Let me bring in Ms. Aguilera on this one as well. Part of what also came up at that meeting, perhaps, which they considered to come up with this, was that they needed to augment the efforts of the state governors who had been supporting one way or the other the police in different states, saying that they were overwhelmed. Now, one wonders, why do you think that in spite of the resources that the governors put in at that time, they still didn't get the desired results?
I think let's be logical here. You are putting money in the constitutional police force, and you are saying you're not seeing results. You bringing in more men and spending more money. I think when we inject this money and when we manage it properly, the problem of the police force, like I keep insisting, is training, capacity building. Men should be prepared for particular responsibilities. Over the years, we do not intend to argue this. Over the years, larger number of the policemen have not received adequate training, and this has to do with finances. Now that the present government is making available such huge amount of money, I think we must look at the area of training, capacity building, getting the police positioned to discharge their responsibility properly, go to the communities, do exactly what they intend to do by partnering with the communities to get results. Because as it is, focus should be less on arrest, prosecution, investigation. We should be dealing with trying to prevent this crime from happening. We are not the proponents of police.
All right, there's this school of thought that believes that, that assumes that this community policing initiative is to stave off all the agitation about state police and perhaps to put an end to all other community policing initiatives that different states or regions may have. Do you subscribe to that?
Yeah, because honestly, community policing is already a form of decentralizing the police force, taking the police back to the roots for them to operate with the community. And like most Nigerians will exercise their fear about state police is because we are trying to get to the stage in which the people themselves will appreciate their police force and not to capitalize on opportunities available to misuse the police force in the states. And I think with the present issue at hand, with the fund released, I think empowering the police to function independently from contributions from the state will give them a kind of form of autonomy to work so hard, because you find out that he who pays the piper dictates the tune. When you have too much interference within the state level, you find out that our functions we have barriers, and so I think
Mr. Aguilera,
there's a problem.
One of those barriers, which has come up several times, even here, I reckon, is the trust. Now, some of those other community policing initiatives that different states have adopted, I think if you look at them closely, there's a higher level of trust between themselves and then the regular policing structure by the establishments, as it were. So how then, if you throw in all of this money and people still don't improve, or the trust doesn't increase amongst the regular policing, because chances are that if they don't tweak who are those carrying out those community policing functions, people may see them as a regular police force, and the mindset will not necessarily change.
That is why the community policing is about bringing together the communities and the traditional police force on the ground. Honestly, when we're able to build this trust, because don't forget, in as long as we continue to function with the community, they'll begin to naturally develop trust, and it depends on our approaches to policing in these communities. By the time we're able to establish a trust between us and the communities, I think naturally they will trust the police and the function becomes easy.
You talked about trust, you've talked about training, but there's something Mr. Ononubu mentioned the other time, which I think is something that you also must have experienced while in office. Each region, each state has its peculiarities: language, religion, tradition, and the security challenges themselves are peculiar. How do you see the community policing initiative and the local vigilantes that have worked, over the years to help their different communities? How do you see them working together, factoring in these differences?
The concept of community policing is about you understanding the community in which you are policing. And it becomes so difficult when you are policing a community, you do not even have an idea about their culture. It's so difficult. So I think when we're trying to work out modalities for this program, we should put into consideration who are supposed to drive these policies in these communities. Because I do not subscribe to the situation where somebody from the north going to carry out community policing in the southeast, where he does not even understand the people, their culture, their tradition, their way of life. Crime and criminality differs from one region to the other. The kind of crimes committed in the north might not be the same crime committed in the south. So we find out that we must actually condition policemen to understand the communities in which they are policing. Otherwise, we're still going to be starting.
That's why now with this one, I have people who have said, look, community policing is not what we want. We want our own police. They use the word "our" there, which subscribes to ownership, trust, and all the other components associated with that in their mindset. So What happens when, at the end of the day, they just tell people, look, yes, the government is coming up with this community policing, but it is not what we want? Do you think that that is likely going to happen if they begin implementation of this community policing structure or initiative?
I think the purpose of governance is to bring safety to people, and community policing is about the people. And when we are patriotic, when we are projecting safety of the people, I think this issue of trying to create a kind of situation where people will distrust this program is not going to be good for this country. For the time being, we have a situation at hand where we need absolute maintenance of law and order, and we should be able to start it from these communities, because one of the reasons for this community policing is because of the belief that crime starts from locality. When they are not properly checked, it begins to escalate to a bigger proportion. So I think most of the crime starts from the local communities. And when they are properly checked, that is why the James Wilson and his colleague Kelly also came up with this the broken window theory. Because once you don't prevent crime, you don't prevent lawlessness, you don't prevent civil disobedience in the localities, it begins to build up to a larger crime. So that is a concept, and I think we should be able to gain the confidence of the people and even the government at the various levels, so that this program will succeed.
Mr. Onungo, very, very briefly, trust is a major component from all what both of you have said to ensure the success of this community policing initiative. What must we do to make sure that the trust quotient does not deplete when this community policing initiative kicks off?
Yeah, well, I think we must define what their roles and responsibilities must be. At the moment, we don't have an effective documentation process other than the manual collection of statements and others. We must have a profiling system that is centralized, so that when a suspect or a criminal is profiled, any part of this country should have access to that information in the shortest, quickest time. That's one. Secondly, we must also look at equipment. Good enough, they have voted for funds, but even the current serving police establishments are struggling with being properly equipped, provided with facilities that can help them work. For instance, they need to be put in communities, and they have to live not below average. They have to live within the average member of that society, so they don't become moral liabilities or economic liabilities to themselves, to their families, and to their aspirations to serve a country and make a country better. Thirdly, we must put in place very effective program that can breed patriotism, breed sincere sacrifice and commitment to the state, not individuals.
I know that some other people also think that we need to revisit the way the IGPs and the CPs are appointed, such that there could be confidence. If people don't have confidence in those processes, they question that as well. But that is where we have to let it go. We do thank you, Alfred Ononugo, and Mr. Abi Agile, former Commissioner of Police, Kaduna State, and Head of the Police Training Command. Thank you both for talking to us today. All right, so we'll be back in a moment and still talk about policing, security-related subject matter. Don't go away. Welcome back. Well, let's talk about that for a moment. Mr. Mark Jacob Nzama joins us. He's a former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice for Kaduna State. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. Now, with the deployment of special forces in the area now, Has anything improved?
Thank you very much for having me. It's important to say that the deployment of troops has not changed anything, because 2 days ago, about 11 people were killed in different locations in southern Kaduna. Houses were burnt, and of course, there was no arrest. For us, nothing has changed. For us, the curfew that has been imposed on parts of southern Kaduna is still ongoing. Farmers cannot till the ground, they cannot take care of their crops. The crops are being destroyed by cattle, and there is no arrest. So nothing has changed.
You know, for conversations to be held, for stakeholders to sit together, the governor, you know, said it in that report that you heard. Of course, the CAN chairman has said it, and of course, Mr. Jonathan Asake in that statement also said that there is a need for all parties to come to a round table and have a conversation. Why hasn't that happened, and how far-reaching do you think that will be?
I believe that that is the right direction to approach this issue. But all of us know, and I'm sure Channels Television has the recorded interview of His Excellency, my own governor, Governor Nasir El-Rufai, wherein he said that the Southern Kaduna people are bigots and that he's not going to sit with them. He's not going to speak with them, and that they are part of the problem. And the language he used was that he's going to go after everybody and he will deal with everybody. Now, once you have said that you are not going to talk to the people, you don't have any business with them, you have already become you are no longer an unbiased umpire in the issue. You are no longer in a position to dispassionately call people together and have them talk to you in confidence. Look, why would the governor of Kaduna State, for instance, refuse to talk to the CAN leadership in Kaduna State, but be comfortable enough to talk to the leadership of CAN from Abuja? Why would the governor of Kaduna be unwilling to open his doors and discuss with the leadership of the Adara Development Association or the leaders of the Adara people, but is willing to go to Lagos, to go to Abuja, and hold discussions with people who are not in any way connected to the issues, who are neither victims or can be said to be the aggressors? Now,
Groups you mentioned,
like
if you can hear me, have these groups you mentioned requested meetings with the governor and he rebuffed them?
I have several letters written by the Adara people in Kajuru local government seeking audience with the governor. And this has been rebuffed. And the governor has said it. I can replay the tapes where he said he is not going to talk to them. He's not going to discuss with Southern Kaduna people. So what do you do? And these are the challenges we have when you come to office with a predetermined position on issues. And when you seek to speak, not as governor, but as yourself, with your own prejudices and your own interpretation of issues, it is wrong for anybody in government to assume that he knows it all. And you can never solve problems with that approach. And I will make this very point clear, that there is no war or bitterness or hatred between the Southern Kaduna and the entire Muslim or Hausa Fulani community in Kaduna State. It's not true. There is a percentage, a very minute percentage of people who are behind these killings. Government that has the responsibility of dealing with them has refused to deal with them. And just like Shehu Sani said, Senator Shehu Sani said, when killings take place in Zamfara and other states, the government condemns such killings. But when it happens in Southern Kaduna, there is an explanation. And the explanation comes from government house. This is the challenge and the very serious issue bedeviling solving this problem. We have had issues in the past. Previous governments, even military administrations, didn't approach this issue like this. They interfaced with people. Committees were set up that interacted with people, and government was seen to be impartial and genuine in addressing the issues. Government dispassionately opened its doors and allowed people to discuss. Just after speaking with the CAN national leadership, you have the tapes. The governor said that Southern Kaduna elites are lazy and that they are waiting to be paid money. That is why the crisis is going on. And that he was not going to give them money and that he was not going to talk to them. How do you solve a problem? Haven't become the champion or the ruler. You have already ruled that these are the culprits.
Just one moment. These issues you raised definitely give concern, but at the state level and at the federal level, in two chambers of the National Assembly, there are representatives of people of Southern Kaduna. What have they been able to do to intervene in this matter? Because at least one would expect that they represent the people and they also should be able to, put their foot on the ground and make some effort. At least they should be able to speak with the governor.
The governor, 2 weeks ago, when the caucus of the National Assembly from Southern Kaduna met and spoke on the floor of the Senate and on the floor of the House of Representatives. And then they addressed a press conference calling on the governor to do certain things. The governor responded by calling them irresponsible leaders. I am sad that this is the body language and the narrative that comes from government housing. It cannot work when you have already compartmentalized your state, me versus them, me against them. They hate me, I'm going to deal with them. They don't like me, I'm going to handle them, I'm going to send them to prison.
But Mr. Nzama, well, I think we'll have to double check some of those things that you say, if that's the case actually. But are there people who are requesting funds from the governor? Because if he's saying it at that level, it means that such exists. Are you saying that they don't exist at any point in time whatsoever?
The truth remains, who is asking for money? The governor has given evidence only everywhere that.
I'm sorry, could you take that again? That part where you say he's given evidence, I think it was coming in broken. We couldn't make sense of that perspective, but let's hopefully when he does come back, if it's a little clearer, we will get back to that. But just give us a moment. We'll be back. All right, welcome back. Well, the connection having some challenges getting back to Mr. Nzama, but we do have him on the line. So, Mr. Nzama, could you clarify what you meant? You were talking about having some sort of evidence. What were you trying to say?
Yes, I was saying that available records, even available even to channels, will show that the governor has said in very clear terms that he's not to engage with he's not going to engage or interface with Southern Kaduna people. And
you refer to specifically?
Pardon?
Which of the records are you referring to specifically?
Yes, the video recordings of interviews with even channels television, where the governor has said he's not going to speak with Southern Kaduna people. These are the records we are talking about. And when you say so, you have placed a barrier between the people that are affected, the victims, and you are saying you are not going to speak with them. But you are comfortable to speak with visitors You have a CAN leadership in Kaduna State, you will not speak with them. You have
Tell us then,
church leaders.
if the governor speaks with the people of Southern Kaduna, what will change? How will it affect things?
The biggest benefit of that was that he would have an understanding of the issues. You don't claim to know everything. You cannot solve a problem while excising a section of the state and completely blanking them out. You cannot solve the problem. How does he know what we
If he speaks to members in the National Assembly and in the State House of Assembly who are representing people from Southern Kaduna?
Those are people he calls irresponsible. He doesn't believe them. He doesn't believe or respect anybody. He has said that the representatives of Southern Kaduna in the National Assembly who spoke, he said that they were irresponsible people. So where do we run to? Who will speak for us?
I'm sorry, but I didn't quite get what you were going to say about what will change if he speaks to them. Apologies on that.
Okay, I said what will change first is that he will have first-hand information from the victims of these attacks as to what they think and how the attacks takes place. What is happening is that the governor continues to rely on third-party information from those around him in government who stay with him in government house. They are not in the hinterland where these attacks take place. So they give him information that he wants to hear. And that is why the narrative he has been bandying, that Southern Kaduna people are the ones killing themselves. It's
now,
crazy.
while you were Attorney General, while you were in government, did the government at the time speak to the people in Southern Kaduna? What changed?
Yes. The government of Kaduna State back then set up what is on record today as the Committee of Elders, Leaders of Thought Forum that was set up by government. 30 people from the north, 30 people from the south. I was part of that project. Governor McCarthy set up that team and insisted that they should discuss across board without the interference of government and even make suggestions as to what was the solution, the way forward on several things. And that discussion gave birth to the creation of chiefdoms. El-Rufai has come to embarrass and humiliate all those chiefs. He has degraded some of them. He has removed so many district heads. He has changed the nomenclature of all the chiefdoms and injured the respect and the harmony that existed in the state.
Well, I thought that they said this crisis had been on for over 40 years.
That's a lie. That is a big lie. Kaduna State.
What's it been on for?
Has had issues, not Southern Kaduna. The Southern Kaduna issues I remember are basically three. The first was this incident in 1987 when there was a problem with a preacher in the College of Education. And Muslim students protested. It blew up into a crisis. The second issue was the relocation of the market in Zango, which also erupted into violence. The third was the problem in Kasomagani. Now, we have had several other issues in Kaduna Metropolis and Kaduna North. People keep talking about crisis in Kaduna without situating it. Look, there has been no fight in Southern Kaduna. Even when we had Maitatine, it didn't get to Southern Kaduna. We had the protests and killings that arose out of the Miss World contest. There was no issue in Southern Kaduna.
All right, Mr. Mark Jacob Nzama. We need to anchor at that point. Mr. Mark Jacob Nzama is the former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice for Kaduna State. We do thank you for your thoughts this morning. All right, let's move on from security-related matters to health. Now, this has got to do with Parkinson's disease. We've got Omotola Thomas joining us. He's the founder of Parkinson's Africa joining us. She joins us via Skype this morning. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. I know many wondering, what are you guys talking about Parkinson's today? So it's equally important. So could you go ahead and tell us about this disease? Are we paying enough attention to it?
Thank you very much for having me, Chamberlain. Parkinson's disease, very simply put, is a brain disease that gets worse over time. It happens when the dopamine-producing neurons in the brain die off. And when enough of these cells die off, a person's ability to perform many different functions, very important functions, including memory, cognition, movement, and balance, become impaired. There are four main symptoms, which are tremors, rigidity, bradykinesia, which is slowness of movement, and postural instability. To answer your question, no, we're not paying nearly enough attention to Parkinson's disease, particularly in Africa. And I'm hoping that with the establishment of Parkinson's Africa, that is something that will get addressed. There is far too much stigma and lack of awareness and misconception about the disease, particularly in Africa.
Perhaps that misconception speaks to a number of things that you would want to quote, you may want to clear. On the one hand, there's some information out there says it's something that happens to older people. One study says the average age of people who are vulnerable to that in Africa is in the region of 69 years old. And we also hear now that it's something that is happening to younger people more frequently. And then you also talked about stigma on the part of those who have been diagnosed with PD. So please clear some of these misconceptions, please.
So first of all, the majority of people who get Parkinson's are 60 and above worldwide. But that does not mean that people my age don't get it. I got diagnosed in 2016 at the age of 35. And I think particularly because of my age, my race, and my gender, it took 5 years for the doctors to actually figure out what was wrong with me. I did multiple brain scans, tests, blood work. I was living in the US at the time, so I had access to proper health care. And it took a really, really long time. I think the numbers, at least in the US, are between 2 and 10% of the population with Parkinson's are young onset. And young onset are those who develop it under the age of 60. Now, there's also something called juvenile onset, which is if you get it under the age of 20. I think stigma is an incredibly big issue, and it's caused by these misconceptions. In many parts of Africa, a lot of people think that it's because of witchcraft or demon possession or some type of curse, and because of that, they hide and they don't come out, and they don't seek treatment. And these are the things that we're trying to address.
Could these misconceptions also be as a result of misdiagnosis? Because to some extent, symptoms of Parkinson's are similar to that of stroke. Could that also be a factor?
I don't think the misconceptions are due to misdiagnosis. There are definitely issues of misdiagnosis, and that has many different factors. Number one, in terms of the number of neurologists that are available across the continent to be able to actually diagnose PD is low. As of 2016, I don't have the updated numbers. I know that there were 80 neurologists in Nigeria for a population of about 180 million and about 20 in Kenya for a population of about 43 million people. So there are just not enough healthcare professionals to be able to diagnose Parkinson's. But Parkinson's does mirror the symptoms of many other illnesses and diseases. Their symptoms do mirror Parkinson's, and I remember, getting tested for so many different things just to rule it out.
How do we address this stigma for the disease?
Thank you for that wonderful question. I think, first of all, the stigma is caused by not only just misconceptions. When we grew up with a mindset of what is accepted, what is considered normal, and anything that deviates from that norm, from that accepted normalcy, like my hands shaking like this, is considered abnormal and is considered abnormal, and anything abnormal is shameful. I think the way to address the stigma is by awareness, is by people like myself and other people who are affected by this illness coming online, on whatever platforms they have, sharing their stories. I think awareness and education is the antidote to the issue of stigma. And I think everybody has a part to play. You guys, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be able to be here today for this platform. People with Parkinson's like myself need to be able to rise up and come out and speak about it, because we don't know what the numbers are specifically in Africa, but until we have enough people making noise, we won't get the attention that Parkinson's needs and deserves.
Tell us about your experience, because you're going about this, you're seeking support, trying to change something. What have you experienced while you've been at it?
Are you talking about my experience with the illness or my experience as an advocate?
As an advocate, and perhaps as with the illness, if you will.
So, in all honesty, Parkinson's is a very difficult and challenging illness to deal with. It has impacted many different aspects of my life. It impacts my ability as a wife and a mom. But as with any other challenge in life, we must be able to adapt and thrive. And that's one thing that I've tried to do throughout my journey. Shortly after I got diagnosed, I made a decision that I was not going to be quiet about the illness, because I felt that silence equals subjugation. And so I I was living in the UK when I got diagnosed in the UK, which is where I live now. I started forming different networks, volunteering for charity. And one of the first things that I noticed was that there was a huge lack of representation. In fact, I wouldn't even say lack of representation. I didn't know any Africans that were diagnosed with Parkinson's, and I felt a huge void. I felt lonely because there are many different unique challenges that I faced as an African with this illness that I wasn't able to really explain to my Caucasian counterpart. And so I decided to create a platform, the same platform that I was looking for when I got diagnosed, where people of where Africans who are connected to or affected by Parkinson's could come on, share their experiences, exchange stories, find resources. And that is basically what Parkinson's Africa is about. Our vision is we envision a continent where everyone who is connected to or affected by Parkinson's on the continent of Africa has access to the information, education, resources, and support that they need. And we've made it our mission to inform, to empower, to support, and to educate Africans with Parkinson's disease. One of the ways that we're doing this is through awareness campaigns, forming strategic partnerships with different organizations to help us improve access to improve access of those who are not able to afford their medication. And I created a video, I think about a month ago, called 7 Reasons. And the video was just to basically highlight the profiles of different Africans suffering from Parkinson's disease. And basically what it was saying to the world, look, Parkinson's exists in Africa. It's not a myth, There are people on the continent with this illness. And we've done quite well. We've raised in the last 3 to 4 weeks over 11,000 Canadian dollars, and all of that money is going directly to fund medication for people who don't have access to it.
And how far-reaching has this advocacy been? I know it's been challenging, but what's been the impact that you can point to as an advocate and as an organization?
So I think one of the highlights, if I can call it that, of my journey on this with Parkinson's disease was last year. I attended the World Parkinson's Congress in Kyoto, and I spoke twice there. And I met a couple who have a foundation called the Farah Foundation. And they have connections to Nigeria. They're not Nigerian, but they have connections to Nigeria. And over the next 3 months, we were able to come to an agreement, an arrangement, whereby they agreed to fund 100 Nigerians with their Parkinson's medication for 1 year. And that program is currently ongoing at LUCE under the guidance of Professor Okubadejo. And it's something that gives me I don't know the patients, I don't know who they are, but because I live in the UK where I have access to all the healthcare and medication that I need, but I still struggle sometimes with Parkinson's. I cannot imagine what people in remote parts of Africa that don't have access to these medications, I can't imagine what their lives are like. And so that's been a very momentous occasion for me.
There are many people who don't understand a lot. They don't know if there are warning symptoms. They don't know if what do they do if their loved ones are affected with this. How do they approach and respond to this kind of scenarios? Could you talk to us about those?
Yes, definitely. Specifically for Nigeria, I believe there are at least 2 tertiary institutions in every state. And each one, maybe not all, but the majority of them have at least one neurologist. So the first thing that I would say is if you suspect Parkinson's at all, for whatever reason, please go to a neurologist. Go to one of the tertiary institutions in your state. If you don't have a neurologist in your state, send me an email. If you go to parkinsonsafrica.com, you will find a contact form there. Contact me and I will find you the closest neurologist that you can get to.
Well, earlier you talked to us about, how Parkinson's, arises. It's because some neurons die in the brain, and that's supposed to happen much later in life. Is there anything that people who have it can do to manage it? Because just as you have said, medications to manage it is very expensive. So is there any do you think there is any way nutrition can help in managing it to feed the brain so the neurons don't die?
So there are pharmaceutical and non-pharmaceutical treatments that I'm aware of. There is no particular nutrition type of diet that will slow down Parkinson's. However, on the pharmaceutical side, the main course of treatment is a drug called levodopa, and there are other alternatives called dopamine agonists. For non-pharmaceutical options, I think exercise is the absolute biggest thing that I can recommend for anyone to do. Exercise is one of the few things that have been shown to actually slow down the progression of the illness. And it's not anything crazy, just 30 minutes, at least 30 minutes a day of any type of exercise that gets your heart rate up. I think there's a lot of buzz and research about cycling and brisk walking. But really, for me, I try to do anything that just gets my heart rate up. In terms of diet, there are different diets. Again, nothing that research has said that definitively slows down the progression, but studies have shown that Mediterranean diet, which is rich in oils, fish, nuts, and legumes, has some positive effect. And there's some people have also speculated that the ketogenic diet also helps.
Claire, you mentioned the other time that young people are now prone to it. Is there any particular segment, any particular function, any particular class of society that is vulnerable to it, that should begin to take precaution?
So the truth is that no one really knows what causes Parkinson's. There are genetic and environmental factors that increase your risk of developing Parkinson's. In fact, it's a great opportunity to talk about a book that I read that has greatly changed my mindset in terms of how I view the things that may contribute towards Parkinson's. And it's called Ending Parkinson's, and it was written by 4 doctors, Bas Bloom, Todd Scherer, Michael Okun, and Ray Dorsey. And what they are arguing is that the environmental factors, such as exposure to toxic chemicals and pesticides, for example, increase your risk of having Parkinson's. So if you live in an environment or in an area where there is exposure to these toxic chemicals, you may be at an increased risk. Genetics-wise, the vast majority of Parkinson's is idiopathic, meaning that nobody really knows what's causing it. But there are, I think, about 15% of people who have Parkinson's have a family history of Parkinson's, but that's the minority.
How do we help? I mean, for those who want to, who are watching and saying, look, what can I do, whichever way, shape, or form?
That's another wonderful question. I think for everybody, I would first ask that you please go to the website, www.parkinsonsafrica.com. And on the website, there's information about the awareness campaign that we're running. There's information about opportunities to fund, to donate towards the medication program. And there's information about how to contact me. For the media, I would like to reiterate, to give us platforms to come on and share our stories. Somebody said something to me the other day. It left a comment on my YouTube and said, Parkinson's is not important with COVID and malaria. And my response to that is, yes, COVID is a massive healthcare crisis that deserves a lot of attention. But that's not stopping cancer patients from getting their medication and treatment. It's not stopping diabetes patients from getting their medication and treatment, and it shouldn't stop Parkinson's patients from getting their medication and treatment. But nobody knows about the struggles and the challenges that we have and we face if we don't come out and if we're not given a platform to speak. I would just quickly also ask corporations to consider including Parkinson's initiatives as part of their corporate social responsibility programs. And lastly, if there are any donors out there, like the Farah Foundation did, we are looking for people to sponsor more medication. All the funds that we're receiving are going directly to funding medication for people with Parkinson's. And I guess my final call would be to the government to help us create robust health policies that will improve access to medication for our citizens. And yeah.
All right, then Omolana Thomas is the founder, Parkinson's Africa. She's also a systems engineer. Thank you for talking to us today, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, then. So there you go. Let's take a look at some comments coming through today. We've got this one from Johnson Abbey. Well, Johnson says, what else should we say? Your first sentence is very complete. We will all watch as this fund is messed up, ends up in private pockets, see some few publicity and some IG visit to states, and then the issues remain. Insecurity, same stories, same pains, same, all the same. But I didn't see that coming.
I sincerely hope not.
Oh, boy.
But this one is from Ifi Great. Says, simply adopt equal representation of all linguistic tribes in every company of police or army approximately. Groom them to police their own village or homeland. Brother protect brother. If they extort, we call the father's name to him. Don't we have streets and estate night guards with gates?
Ooh, wow, there you go. What a day and a society. Look, there's several other things that are equally important in life.
Absolutely.
You know, beyond politics and the other things that we grapple with on a regular basis. So society needs to actually evolve and see that that's why we always say certain things. But that is the show today. We thank you all for watching. We'll see you again next week. Don't forget, take care of yourselves and each other. I'm Chamberlain Oso.
Now I'll repeat that this way. Be your brother's keeper. I'm Ayo Makede. Have a great day and a wonderful weekend.